Hi folks, so in this series of tips I wanted to explain to you some of the things that busy coaching professionals see every day. So it's not just me, it's other professionals see this every day, and people struggling with their ball control, their distance, their power, their consistency. And one of those starts with the quality of how they hold the club, or the grip as we know it. Make no mistake, for everybody who plays golf, Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods when he's back and so on, you have to control what the club face is doing throughout the swing, but particularly obviously at the moment of truth, when you hit that golf ball, you need to have a degree of control of what the club face is doing. Where the club face is pointing at the moment of impact has largely got about 80% influence of what that ball does, depending on the loft of the club. So if you don't control the club face and have no awareness of what it's doing, or little awareness, you're not really going to be able to control the golf ball and your golf shots and ultimately your scores. And of course what happens with the grip is that people get introduced to golf and they're shown a grip by their friends or what have you, or they really don't understand the detail of the grip, because not only does it have a function to bring the club face back to square at impact, it also has a big function on how your wrists are going to work, which are vital levers in the golf swing, and also how it's going to control the orientation of the club face to the arc during your swing, and more importantly at impact. And we all know from books and videos and so on and YouTube, oh, we should have the two V's and so on. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, let's just get a little guide about where the club should be placed in your hand. If I held my hand out here and literally put the club parallel to my thumb and then across, this is roughly, so it's in this crease here, roughly in the crease above the little finger, across to the first knuckle of your forefinger. So like so, across at this angle, folded round, and this allows that wrist to create this hinging function, which I won't go into all the fancy worlds of ulnar deviation and so on, and just getting this motion, but it allows us to hinge it. Then you've got the degrees of how much you put the hand over and where it should be, because people say, oh, it should be in the fingers. Well, if you get it too much in the fingers, when you wrap it round, it's going to be too far over. If you have it too much in the palm, it could be the other way. So if I got a little credit card here and just pinched it between my thumb and palm and brought the club on and then twisted it a little bit as a reference there, you could see just about that the credit card here is aiming to my trail shoulder, my right shoulder for a right-handed player. So let's call this 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock and so on. So we're just tilting it to about 12:30, 1 o'clock. This would be what's known as a pretty neutral grip, that when our hands return to a decent impact position, the back of the left hand is towards the target and the club face is nice and square. Now the more I rotate my hand round, so I've got it at 2:30 now, if I rotated my hand back to square, you can see that's having a closing club effect on the club face. Conversely, if I put it the other way around here at 11 o'clock and returned it, you can see the face is open. That said, there are certain top players that do not have an orthodox grip, which I'll come back to in a minute. Now, what about the bottom hand or the right hand? Well, that hand, if I pinch it, let's call this 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2. How you introduce this hand to the club is really important. Is if you're going to shake hands with somebody, you want to feel it's coming side on. So you're just bringing it onto the side of the club, not underneath. But of course, if your lovely friends have told you, oh, you've got to interlock your fingers, you must jam these together, the first thing you will do, and I've seen millions of golfers do this over the years, is you'll fire this hand underneath, get it nice and secure, and you'll end up with a grip that looks like this. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't allow your right wrist or trail wrist to fold and function correctly. We call this flexion and extension in modern terms, but you're folding the right wrist here, so it should fold in the backswing to allow us to get the club on the correct plane or attitude. So that's actually what it does. We're just trying to get the club moving round our body on the angle it's designed to be used, so your wrists will have this sort of appearance where the right wrist folds back and the left wrist is fairly flat ideally. So When you interlock your fingers, the objective is not to push the roots of the fingers really tight together. I call that the overlocking grip, the death grip. So people are strangling it like this, and in doing so you can now see the club faces turned down or closed. And if I released correctly, that ball would go over the fence here. So then you end up having to protect yourself through impact, so you now end up with two faults. So you've got one fault, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're trying to square the club face, which is the object of the game, to get the ball to go straight. But now you've got a chicken wing and your friends say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. So you create these other monsters in the swing. So remember, the hands are, if this is 12, maybe half 12, 1 o'clock-ish. Bring the left hand on, slight fold over, but introduce the right hand side on. My preference would be that you piggyback, you just overlap the little finger in the groove. But if you are, please God, going to interlock, only lightly do the fingers, don't jam them in, because if you do, your hands will be pulled underneath. Now, I did mention there are some exceptions, namely Colin Morikawa or John Rahm, a couple of the world's best players, have got what we call weak left hand grips and strongish right hand grips. If they hit it with a traditional impact, the faces would be open, but what happens is they've got compensating errors, and in both cases they'll put their left wrist in what we'd known in the old days as a bowed position. What that does is, because the weak grip normally opens the face, when they have a stronger right hand, that allows them to bend the right wrist back and close the club face a little bit more. And then certainly in the likes of Colin Morikawa at impact, his wrist really gets into this bowed state here, of flexion as they call it. So he really does that, and that allows, that's his mechanism with his grip for squaring that club face. I know when I try that, it hurt my wrist, so you've got to be a little careful. So it's not something I would recommend. Again, Dustin Johnson, you might see, has this position here, but then he's got a tilting action with his body through impact, which holds the face momentarily square before he then lets it go. So they've learned those grips as young men. They've hit millions of golf balls. They're very athletic. They're not a grip that you would traditionally go out and teach anybody. You want to have ideally a fairly orthodox grip within a certain range of movement, and if you then get to a more elite level, then you can make little subtle changes of a weaker grip or a stronger grip and twist change the relationship of the club face to the hands, because that is then going to allow you to be able to shape shots. But the golf ball's the biggest barometer, and if your ball isn't going straight, that tells you there's a differential between the club face and the path. And the first place you investigate is the quality of how you're holding it and how your wrists are functioning during the swing. And if that's okay, then you can start to look at other actions in your motion. But don't get caught out, as I say, by just, oh, you're assuming your grip is correct, because for most cases when I look at folk, they often aren't. I see more poor grips than I do see good grips. So make sure you get the detail right, look at good players. You're not trying to strangle it. If it was a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest, you're holding it at 4 or 5. Remember, particularly on full shots, you need some speed with the swing. So I hope that helps. Remember, get the detail right. It really is important. You're going to be rewarded by good club face control.